lobbying for privacy in a hostile era. And I'll hand over to Lisa, who will take over from here.
Hello, we live in interesting times, don't we? A hostile era indeed. So stick around for this panel. It's going to be very interesting. We're going to delve into some sticky questions. I would like to introduce my panelists today. Traffic has been really bad, so we are missing some of our panelists, but we were going to have Marta Belcher from the Filecoin Foundation, but instead and her picture will be up here in a second, but instead we are honored to welcome Clara Tsao to the stage. She's also working with the Filecoin Foundation and doing great work over the Filecoin Foundation. I'm having a tongue twister moment. My name is Lisa Loud. I'm the Executive Director of Secret Network, and we're going to be talking about some spicy topics today, so I'd also like to invite Eric Alston from the Finance Division at University of Colorado. Thank you. Welcome to the stage. Welcome, Eric. And Amar Bedi, CEO of Tashi Protocol. Is he here? Okay. All right. And I think Andy is stuck in traffic as well. So we have you guys are going to have lots to say, lots of time to make your points. No pressure. All right, so we are talking about lobbying in a hostile era. Obviously, we're in an interesting political situation now since the election. There's changing priorities in the US, and the US, as we all know, has a big impact on the rest of the world and what the policies become. So my first question for you is, can technical standards in confidential computing really affect they be leveraged to build credible cases for privacy legislation that is adaptable across jurisdictions? And some of our other panelists are from other jurisdictions, but I think, Eric, that you probably have a good handle on the global scene. So why don't you take this question?
Yeah, sure, thank you. And so, I think technical standards have to be part of the solution, and I am not myself technically sophisticated. I was out at ZooConnect Istanbul, and I went to the ZK Day. And initially, I'm like, this sounds like magic. You can prove the, characteristics of an underlying piece of information without revealing that piece of information. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized ZK seems like something that actually has deep compliance benefits, pursuant to one of the points that was raised in the last talk about the importance of compliance to even enable these networks to continue to survive and have sufficient uptake. And so I've actually co-authored a piece entitled Polycentric Privacy Governance in the Digital Age, arguing that zero-knowledge tech in particular has beneficial applications for showing compliance without requiring, networks or, Web3 companies to reveal the entirety of their balance sheet, to reveal the entirety of their customer information, which is perfectly consistent with the standards of privacy that private businesses already enjoy in the United States and in many other jurisdictions. And so for me, I think it's socializing regulators and legislators with the possibility for zero-knowledge proofs and their applications for, proof of solvency, proof of voting occurring in ways that are actually have integrity within those processes. I think there are huge benefits to zero-knowledge proofs that are just not well known, because as of last November, I was like, wait, this is amazing. And so to me, I'm kind of becoming a zero knowledge and privacy advocate, although to be very clear, I think privacy is incredibly important because of the way in which it actually is a foundation for other rights. The exercise of association and speech for minorities or vulnerable interests, to me, they rely integrally on privacy itself.
Thank you. That's really interesting. And I think it's baby steps, right? You're trying to get the concept of ZK proofs across to people who are in the Web 2 world or in the education world or in the industry world, not necessarily Web 3 advocates or natives or degens. And that's great. Have you gotten familiar at all with any of the other CC technologies like FHE or TEEs, or even garbled circuits or MPC?
So I'm learning in real time, and so actually today was my introduction to garbled circuits, and so to me I'm actually and as a result of being invited to join this panel, I was like, wow, there are other confidential computing techniques. And so my co-author and I are about to submit to the Journal of Institutional Economics, the piece to which I was referencing. And thanks to that, there's likely to be treatment of other tech, such as that to which you alluded.
That's amazing. Thank you for the work you do, because I think the intersection of the Web 2 world and what we're bringing with confidential computing that's where it's at. That's like the crux point. And without people like you who are bringing that from the other side to the Web 3 world, I just don't think it'll happen. So let us know how we can support you. Clara, did you want to take a shot at that question too?
Yeah, I mean, I actually wanted to build off of what Eric said around different applications in zero knowledge proofs. So I spent years actually working in U.S. government across Obama and the last Trump administration, actually on the issue of election security. And today we're facing a big challenge in the US and also all around the world where people don't trust the election process. Sometimes that comes with content that they see online. Sometimes it's actually the process of voting and trusting the systems. And when you can use an application like zero knowledge proofs to really prove that someone voted without election officials being able to see the results, there are so many possibilities if we can implement this kind of technology in the right way that have huge implications for furthering democracy. And so I just wanted to add to that because I think a lot of us who are coming in from the US are feeling the election wave and some of the polarization that has continued to evolve over the last few years of sentiment around elections in general. And we're actually, I don't know if you guys know this, but this year is a year where the most people around the world has been voting simultaneously. This year, 49% of the world is voting. So it's not just the Western world. Everyone is engaging in this election process and figuring out how to do so in a way where the internet is at the tip of their fingertips and they're getting pieces of information from all around, and some might be modified by AI or other means to push a particular narrative. And I think this is when projects like Filecoin, which I work on with Marta and my third co-founder, Megan, we co-run the Filecoin Foundation. We're really looking at how we can think about storage as a layer to authenticate and prove that a piece of content has not been altered over time, and how we can also at the same time preserve the identities of journalists who are submitting vulnerable information for reasons where they really don't want their identity to be known. So groups like Freedom of the Press Foundation, they have a tool called Secure Drop. And we're the largest supporters of Secure Drop and tools like this because we believe that you should be able to securely, with privacy, be able to share key information that the public needs to know.
Amazing. Yeah, I heard Marta speak at the Filecoin Bangkok event a couple days ago, and she used a term that I'm actually quoting. So she said, as a woman, we've kind of made a Faustian bargain. We have a silver lining. This election result is great for crypto, and sometimes as women, we really question the underlying philosophies that have brought it about, and yet we're enjoying the benefits of it. So I'm keeping that quote. Faustian bargain was a really good one. So let me ask you, in what ways can decentralized privacy tools be designed to both withstand regulatory scrutiny and empower users without compromising core privacy principles? I think this is a three-sided question because you've got the push to maintain compliance, and then you have the other side push to maintain privacy and rights, and then it all comes together in this, but you don't want it to be public. So either of you want to start with that question?
Sure. I mean, I think a deep dilemma is what is the right level of privacy, but I think the answer may be easier simply because we lack so much privacy in the digital age that I feel like steps in that direction are an improvement, and let's get a few steps in that direction before we argue over true anonymity, etc. But pursuant to the decentralization point you were making, I think the integrity of a lot of the applications of these technologies is actually deeply enhanced in decentralized contexts. What do I mean by that? I'm about to give a talk down in Australia at RMIT in Melbourne entitled Digital Constitutionalism: Rights Are Only as Good as Their Enforcers. And make no mistake, I myself can't verify truly whether something has run a ZK circuit successfully. I have to take someone's word for it. That means there are deep information asymmetries for the technically unsophisticated like me in terms of accessing these technologies. That gives rise to the emergence of independent audit functions, often in highly specialized organizations that maintain a good reputation for doing so. But the problem is the greater the incentives to defect from a particular rights protection on the part of a private technical provider, that audit is obsolete by the time the auditor is leaving the building. And that issue is increasing in terms of the value of defecting from a promise or a guarantee of rights protection, including privacy in these contexts. And so I view the deployment of these technical solutions on decentralized networks as actually essential, because then those who are performing the specialized auditing functions can have the confidence that the rules aren't changing, because one, these rules are pretty entrenched on blockchain networks, and two, it's pretty darn visible when rule changes occur. And to me, that's actually essential to maintaining the integrity of this critical auditing function for folks like me who are beset by information asymmetries in so many of these technical contexts.
Yeah, the asymmetry is not governed by power so much as technical acumen, is kind of what you're saying. Everyone has the ability to see the same information, not everyone has the ability to understand that information. Clara, did you want to address the question as well?
Yeah, I wanted to just kind of take away one point for all of you guys here, which is safety and privacy are sometimes on the opposite odds of the spectrum. I used to work on terrorist use of social media, where there was a lot of challenges with how to protect people, but also a lot of governments who don't care about protecting privacy will have a backdoor. And I think this is where there's a lot of opportunity when we think about decentralized AI agents, that a lot of people, even this week, are thinking about, where you can preserve identity, preserve where data is coming from, but also help key individuals get information without necessarily revealing who the user is. But I think this is important, because if you look at the history of US legislation, I also spent years working on content moderation and trust and safety. A lot of these are really big challenges where you see a lot of legislation that's meant to protect kids. You see a lot of kids' online safety acts. Even this year, there's a lot of regulation that no one in Congress can agree on. And the biggest challenge is a lot of these things that are meant to protect kids end up leading to a lot of their personal privacy being significantly violated. And so I think there's a lot of work to be done in DC, and also for members of Congress, just the differences of what their end outcome should be, because they're always going to be at odds. There's always going to be trade-offs. And I think a lot of times people tend to confuse the two as the same, when in fact they are quite dangerous to the other. I've also spent a lot of time working with different trust and safety teams at large companies, and there are so much legislation that end up benefiting no one. Right? They end up creating compliance measures where people working at companies end up spending a lot of time just trying to comply with the policy in any piece of legislation, and they can't protect the users. They can't also protect privacy of users. So I think this is when we think about ways that we can help as a community. One of the initiatives that we support out of the Filecoin Foundation for the Decentralized Web, our nonprofit arm, are programs like Tech Congress, where we try to bring the top blockchain experts or technologists into government to do a term of service, and for them to also sit at the forefront of how to also write the best policy while helping people who are not as deep in the weeds on these issues really understand the nuances. And I was very similarly spending time for almost 4 years in US government doing something like this, where I felt like it was very transformative to really be at the table to bring people along. And there is always going to be people that don't understand. You just have to have the right talent if you want the right change, both outside from an advocacy standpoint and also within key government roles.
Amazing. And Lisa, since we don't have very many panelists, would you like to make a comment on this? Why, yes, thank you, Lisa, I would. I have had the privilege of meeting with Commissioner Hester Peirce several times over the last year, in this year actually, and she told me some things that really surprised me. I was talking to her as, a representative of the SEC, but she was coming to these crypto conferences, so I was like, wow, you're cool. And you're meeting with me, this is really cool. So I asked her, because I was trying to persuade her that some of us want to be compliant. And she said to me, you guys are trying to bend over backwards. She said, why are you trying to build in back doors to everything when that can so easily be used by corrupted governments? And instead, why don't you stay true to the ideals that spawned this industry in the first place and think about ways that you can be compliant without building back doors into everything that will ultimately erode people's privacy and confidence. So that's my answer.
Can I add something real
Thank
quick
you.
on that?
Yes.
And so I've actually also had the privilege of meeting Commissioner Peirce at a crypto event in London, and I think she's excellent on these issues, but I also think that I completely agree, bending over to show compliance, at some level, it's at odds with the core principles on which kind of any civil society is founded. What do I mean by that? Innocent until proven guilty. And so for me, taking on some of the terrible narratives that are out there and the faulty logic that effectively suffuses those narratives, which is if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear, it's like that is perfectly at odds with a presumption of innocence until proven guilty. And so for me, there's the debates are so riven with kind of just fallacious reasoning. Another one that I think is really just suffusing the environment associated with the SEC regulating the issuance of, securities to a large secondary market is that of, I'm not sure how separable economic and financial privacy are from associational and speech privacy, especially surrounding actions on these networks. And so my co-author on the piece I referenced earlier, she and I sent shielded payments back and forth to one another on ZK Bob, which is just a shielded payment network on Ethereum. And they were USDC, under $200, because we didn't have that much to burn, but it was actually queued to a manual key that we'd sent one another on Proton Mail. And so the payment was actually a message. My first message to her was, Hola Sofia, ¿qué tal? Because she's Spanish, and so we had a Spanish key, but the payment itself was actually duly encrypted, it was shielded, but then it was also keyed to a PDF we had sent one another in an encrypted message. And we called that, I know it's not an actual proof in the context of crypto, we called that proof of entangled privacy. But I think we also need to challenge the narrative that, yeah, your speech and associations deserve privacy, but your economic and financial activity don't. Because to me, I'm not sure how separable those things are in practice in this sort of brave new frontier we're all excited about.
Yeah, that leads perfectly into my next question, which is how can we use technical evidence and cryptographic proofs to counter the narrative? And I just want to talk about this narrative that you raised about how privacy equals secrecy and obstruction and nefarious activity. Clara, do you want to address this since Eric has started us off, but is privacy bad?
I think privacy is good overall, but I think bad actors will find every channel to weaponize and use it for bad. And I think our society, and especially policymakers, tend to only focus on the bad. I remember when, if you imagine years ago when the internet first came about, a lot of people were worried, especially on Capitol Hill, that the internet was going to be filled with porn. And today there is porn, but there's also so much that has come from the richness of people being able to use the web for so much good with that. And for us, I think the biggest challenge we want to solve at the Filecoin Foundation and within the Filecoin network is making sure that we can solve the incentive structure of the web today, where at the end of the day, every single major monopoly out there, their business model is built on one thing, which is advertising and harvesting user data to be able to resell and be able to raise their next venture capital fund. And we really believe that we can do better, but in order for us to solve this larger problem of incentive structure on the web, we have to solve it at the data level. And so instead of your data belonging to one of 4 companies that own most of the world's data, we want to make sure that the data can be secure in storage providers, data centers all around the world of your choice, and that we can also make sure there's resilience and backup. And so we have a proof called proof of storage that allows you to store your data at different data centers, and also for you to retrieve that data at any point in time. So even if there's a government shutdown in country X, you will be able to access that data. This is also really important because a lot of people are not just thinking about data resilience these days, they're also thinking about being jailed to a single provider with their data for the rest of their life. Who here has had to pay for more storage on their iPhones or on other providers, right? And so sometimes at some point in time, it just becomes so expensive to migrate your data. You're locked in, and these centralized monopolies have the ability to change the price point at any point in time, double the price, triple the price, and they often also keep updating their terms of service, where at some point, you can't keep track of what they're selling, what they're not. I think the other dangerous part about all of this is in the age of AI, which has been a hot topic this week at DevCon, we're going to see more and more content online today that people experience being generated by AI. And I think one estimate says 80%, 60 to 80% of new content by the end of 2026 will be AI generated. When we think about that version of data and what people are consuming, I think the biggest challenge there is being able to trust that data is coming from a single source and you can track how it's changed. Because at some point in time, everyone's going to be using AI in some way in their life, some for more productive means, some for more nefarious means, who knows. But we want to make sure that we can really make sure content can be authentic, and also we can have a set of new companies building on a different business model. And this is why a lot of companies, on stage here or, in this conference this week, they are thinking about how to build decentralized applications that don't necessarily rest on the business model of harvesting user data. We have 200 companies and organizations right now in the Filecoin network building different kinds of on-ramps to store all kinds of storage and making sure those can be secure, whether that's you spending, a couple $100 or $1 million on a monkey NFT and making sure that it doesn't just go down in some point in time, or it could be around making sure that your wallet that just doesn't go down and when if Bitcoin hits 90K, which I think it has, right?
It probably
so
has.
Those are the things that we think a lot about, both in the Web3 and Web2 contexts, and making sure that the world has a good foundation of authentic data that AI is going to be fueled on. We also see a lot of trends in decentralized physical infrastructure in the last year alone in the blockchain space. There's more and more companies and entrepreneurs thinking about decentralized physical infrastructure, from GPUs to weather stations, and all of that needs to be sitting on decentralized data.
That's true. The future is around storage. We don't have much time, but does anyone have any questions before we? Yes. Where is the room to create and to be compliant if you don't have the room to actually experiment, especially in the EU, where there's regulation that specifically targets coins that have privacy features? Would you like to address this?
Yeah, I'm terrified in terms of the Tornado Cash precedent, and I think open source software is a form of speech that should be protected far, far more greatly than it currently is. And so unfortunately, I don't have a good answer for you because that is a terrifying precedent that the EU is setting. I would say at a minimum, if you're trying to develop those kind of things, get out of the EU. But at a broader level, I think I just testified to, or not lectured to a bunch of judges, 60 state and federal judges in Las Vegas, about the uses to which data is being put and the types of data points that are generated from all types of online activities, from health to sexual activity to, you know, everything that people are like, that should be protected data. And they were clearly shocked, almost to like jaws open shocked. And so I do think making the narrative more public about why we might all benefit from better privacy surrounding all of our digital activities. I know it sounds kind of like a truism, but boy, I'm not sure what other tools we have, and they were clearly shocked when I revealed the extent to which our information is out there for the gray market in data and the numerous data brokers and intermediaries that are already extant in the ecosystem.
Thank you so much. We're out of time, but thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. And our speakers may be available if you'd like to ask them questions. So thank you so much for being here. I learned a lot. And we're moving on to our next panel. So we're going to go into some popcorn keynotes, which should be exciting. And Adam is going to tell you all about them.